This is Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.
I shudder thinking how the world can be so cruel. Lend my voice to those who can't. It's time we try, it's time we care, it's time we stand. It starts with a voice.
Welcome to the Special Chronicles Podcast. My name is Daniel Smrokowski. I'm the founder and host of Special Chronicles, an athlete leader with Special Olympics Illinois, and a former Southern Tribal Global Messenger with Special Olympics. The website, specialchronicles.com, to follow Special Chronicles on socials, wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe to our newsletter, find the show notes for this episode. And yeah, specialchronicles.com. This week on the Special Chronicles podcast series, a recap of Turin 2025. We have a returning guest, Lou, who is the chief of sport and competition at Special Olympics International, to talk about the most recent World Winter Games. And by the time you guys all hear this, the World Winter Games happened a month ago. And so we're excited to kick off this 2-month series, about 10 or 11 all new episodes that we're so excited to be premiering right here on this podcast. So make sure that if you are subscribed on YouTube, following us on specialchronicles.com, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, keep following this podcast because you do not want to miss these exciting episodes. Please put your virtual hands together as we welcome Lou back on Special Chronicles. Welcome back, Lou.
Daniel, a pleasure to be here. Always have time, enjoy the conversation, always learn something on your podcast. So thanks for having me on. I'm real happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. I'm excited. I've got an exciting lineup of guests that we will be premiering over the next. We'll kicking the series off with you on March 31st this coming week, and then all the way through the beginning of June. It's usually I do the series leading up to the games, but just because of my busy schedule, we kind of had to kind of push it as a recap. But awesome. You've the first time that you were on was a few years ago before Kazan was canceled, and then we had you on again leading up to the Berlin games, and Ian joined as well.
Yeah, that's right.
And so why don't you recount briefly for all listeners the story of how we got connected? Because just before we both sat down, I took a short walk, and I still vividly remember the moment of when we first met in person in Abu Dhabi. So I'm sure we have some long-time listeners, but I'm sure we're going to have a lot of new listeners to the program. So why don't you recount how we first met?
Sure. Whenever I think of you and Ian, I always think of that story. So we were in Abu Dhabi, and there was a reception at the German embassy in Abu Dhabi because they were hosting the next games. And a colleague of mine and I were standing down by the water, probably 25 yards away from everybody else, and just standing there chatting. And then you and Ian walked over and you introduced yourselves, which I thought was so cool because I'm really shy. I would never do that. So I had so much respect for the fact you guys came over, you introduced yourself. We talked for a while. You guys both have, really outgoing personalities. Ian's a big personality. So I thought that was just fantastic. So every time I think of either of you or you two together, I always think of where I was standing and how you guys walked over and just said, these are two guys. I think we'll just start talking and we'll make friends. Fantastic. I really like that story.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome. And I think that story really shows what the movement is about, what the inclusion revolution is about, that two of us at the time, well, we're now former Southern Tribal Global Messengers, but and then you being on staff, that we still, it doesn't matter what challenges Ian and I have, but we're still able to go up to each other and talk.
Oh, it's so great. I'm really shy. I love that in other people. I wish I was more like that. I'm always a little nervous. I'm a little shy. I'm the good second man in. So if I was with you or if I was with Ian and either of one of you started the conversation, I'm right in there behind you and I'm good.
Yeah.
But that first line, I'm a little shy. So yeah, credit to you guys.
Awesome. So, can you share a little bit briefly about your journey of how you became the chief of sport and competition at Special Olympics International? For anybody who might not know.
Sure. So I started my career in Atlanta in 1995. I worked on the Atlanta Olympics for the organizing committee. Then after that, I worked on the Sydney 2000 Olympics. Then I worked on the Salt Lake Olympics. And then I went to work for the International Paralympic Committee, who some of you may know. And in the U.S., Los Angeles will host the next Paralympic Games. So went to work for the International Paralympic Committee. Then I went to work for the International Olympic Committee. Then I did some agency work. And I had the good fortune of meeting Mary Davis in Rio at the 2016 Olympic and Paralympic Games. And Mary and I had a good conversation. We watched the opening ceremony together. And then a couple of months later, she called me and asked me if I wanted to join. And I had some friends and people that I knew from other parts of my life that had worked at Special Olympics, always knew the movement, always admired the movement. So when the opportunity came up to get involved, I jumped right in. And I'm working with a couple of people that I was, in one case, a former colleague, and another case, a friend who are on our team now. So yeah, it was almost a natural fit to get here.
Awesome. And before we get into recapping the World Winter Games, take us back to leading up to these games, because usually it's every 2 years, but there was such a big gap with the winter ones. I know my class of Southern Tribal Global Messengers, we missed out on the winter games. Yep. with going to two summer World Games, but take us back and share with us what your responsibilities entailed leading up to such a big event, because it was such a big gap from, I believe, the last World Winter Games were in Austria. And if our listeners go on specialchronicles.com/Turin2025, on that page, we have episodes of all of the World Games since 2013. So 2013, and then I did a daily podcast in 2015, and then 2017, and then some podcasts covered in 2019, and then obviously 2023, and then now 20. So every World Game since 2013, we have a series of episodes. But yes, kind of take us back to the moments leading up to these.
Sure. So my first day at SOI was the day, it was a board meeting the day that Abu Dhabi got selected. So the board voted for Abu Dhabi, and then we started to look at what was after Abu Dhabi. So Abu Dhabi was 2019. Normal course, we would have a World Winter Games in 2021 following the Austria Games of 2017. So we started to look for a host. We didn't have as much time as we probably needed. We had an agreement with Sweden. Sweden was trying to put together the government funding. We went to Sweden. We had some competition, but ultimately they couldn't put together a World Winter Games. The funding wasn't there. The government wouldn't support it. So we had to pivot. We pivoted to Russia, Kazan. And at that time, the pandemic had started. And then from the pandemic, there was the issue with Russia and Ukraine. So we wound up having to cancel Kazan and thus miss the window of having the games in 21, where Kazan was going to be in 22. And then we had to start looking. And at that time, we had a process going for 2025. We had two bidders. We had Turin in Italy, and then in Switzerland, Zurich, in the region around Zurich. So we were able in 2021, we awarded 25 to Italy, and now our next World Winter Games will be in 29 in Switzerland. So we're in a much better place now.
Awesome. And we're going to go ahead and just take a short break to let all listeners know how they can support this podcast. Because if it wasn't if it wasn't for our supporters, then we wouldn't be able to keep the microphone on, keep the technology plugged in, the website hosting, audio hosting, video hosting. All of this it's free for all of you to listen, but it costs money every month for us to keep this podcast and our programs going. And so we'll be back to recap the World Winter Games in Turin, Italy, with Lou right after this short break on specialchronicles.com. To let you all know that support for Special Chronicles comes from listeners like you. Please join our supporters with a monthly or one-time donation so we can operate our studio, continue our mission, giving respect and voice to people with disabilities. Visit specialchronicles.com/give. That's specialchronicles.com/give. And if you want to access bonus content, including about a 5-minute pre-show of Lou and I just chatting after he got back from his walk, if you want to be able to watch that behind the scenes content, you can join now at specialchronicles.com/plus. I believe it starts at $10 a month and goes up, or just any one-time donation. You can join now at specialchronicles.com/plus to get access to that. Awesome. So Lou, the Special Olympics World Winter Games, as we both know, I'm sure some of our listeners know, it's a global event with athletes from all around the world. I know I was, you asked me in the pre-show if I followed some of the coverage, and I followed a little bit of the coverage, and then I was also getting some text messages from some people that I know that are over there, and one of Jenny Fortno, who's on the board of directors, and she actually she first started volunteering with Special Olympics in when she was in college 30 years ago, and now her son goes to Yale, and her son and some of his friends from college are volunteering. So it was kind of a neat mother-son type of like a story. But she ran into some colleagues that I know from United Airlines who were over there, and so it was neat to be getting text messages.
Yeah.
And so, what makes the 2025 games in Turin so special, and what can share just like some overview of an overview of the competition? Because in doing some research for this episode, I think I saw dance sport is one of the new, which we're going to be having Natalie and Trey from Special Olympics USA, two athletes. Natalie was on at the leading up to the Abu Dhabi World Games on this podcast, but she'll be she and her and her dance partner will be on. So I'm glad that we're going to highlight one of the new sports on this. But give us like what makes these World Winter Games in Turin so special.
Sure. So I think in part it was a real challenge over the years leading up to the games. It was a really hard event for us. It was a hard event for the organizing committee. So they bid in 2021. Turin got awarded the games. And then they had a change in government, as will happen. They had to restructure the organizing committee and set it up differently. The funding came very, very late, later than it should have. So a lot of the planning was delayed. But in the end, all of that sacrifice, all the hard work, all the trips we had over there, all the stress was really all worth it. Everything came late, but everything came really well. I mean, it all came together really, really well. The media coverage was outstanding. The Italian media, everything from, I went out and saw LETR. I went to a couple of stops at LETR, and being with LETR is always fantastic. The LETR team did a great job. The final leg runners were great. So from LETR through to the arrivals of the delegations, the Global Youth Summit, we really got off to a great start with a lot of these events, and it built a lot of confidence leading up to the opening ceremonies, which were spectacular. And then from there, the competition and everything went really well. We had 100 delegations, about 1,500 athletes. As you mentioned, we had dance sport for the first time, 75 dance sport athletes from 26 countries. Everybody was really happy with dance sport. So the event came off really, really well. There'll be a nice legacy for SO Italy. The Prime Minister of Italy came and toured some of the venues, met with the athletes, met with the spectators. We had a board meeting, a lot of celebrities. President of Poland came. So really, it was hard to get there. You wouldn't want to do it this way every time, but it came really good at the end. It was fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, a lot of the coverage that I was following on Instagram and on social media was I wish I was there. We were trying to figure out how I could bring this podcast there, but that the sponsorship for that had fell through.
Sure.
So the maybe in 2020,
Santiago 2027. Exactly.
I'm hoping that I can get there. But briefly, you mentioned the LETR, and I knew there was a couple LETR officers in Illinois, my local program, that were over there. So it's exciting. I know my mom came out to the games in Berlin. She wanted to volunteer, but she couldn't be registered as a family and volunteer. So she ended up just being a family. But my mom actually studied in Berlin when she was in college, and my mom always tells people that she went. She saw the LETR when in Berlin at those games. So it was a lot of fun. I have the Eternal Flame of Hope that we have in Chicago. I on my Canon or Nikon, I took a picture and I blew that up by an 8x10, and I got that frame in my living room. I think my mom has it hanging, so it's an really original. Nice. An original photograph, but the games, as we said, will feature several winter sports. Can you talk about how the athletes prepared for these sports, and how Special Olympics ensures that they are ready for challenges of these winter sports? Because I'm sure there are probably some delegations that might not have snow, and so what kind of how did either SOI or the local program or regions help to prepare that?
So we work really closely with the 7 regions when it comes to quota and the allocation of quota. And you're right, we want to make sure that athletes are well prepared, well trained, that they have the right conditions for their sport. In part, this is why dance sport's a great sport and it's growing really fast. But part of the reason we decided to put dance sport on the winter program was so that athletes in countries that didn't have winter conditions could still participate in the sport. So we have dance sport and we have floorball are options for countries that don't have snow. So Africa sent up floorball teams, they sent up dancers. So we're trying to provide options, because to have somebody who's practicing the sport not in the right conditions is not really what we're looking to do. So we work closely with the regions and the local programs to identify the the athletes and provide the quota to the programs. Yep.
Awesome. And as we highlighted at the top of the episode, the importance of inclusion. I think the story that you shared about how we got connected highlights that. But you share with our listeners, how is the inclusion of us athletes with intellectual disabilities being highlighted at the Winter Games, especially in sports?
Oh, this was
associated with able-bodied athletes.
Sure. Well, we have unified, so we have unified floorball. But I'll tell you, there's a couple of great things. I love MATP. I'm a big MATP fan. We're doing next level stuff with MATP. One of the coolest things was we had athletes like Kira Byland and several other athletes. Kira is the chair of the Global Athlete Leadership Council. She's from Great Britain, a cyclist, a really great athlete. But Kira was coaching MATP. So now you had athletes coaching athletes, which was great. The other thing I thought was fantastic is your group of Sergeant Shriver Global Messengers. They were involved in the crew. We had two closing ceremonies. We had one up in the mountains in the snow, which is where I was, and then we had one in the city in an arena. The one in the city, the SSGMs designed the show. They worked with the production company, and basically all the content, all the creativity came from the SSGM. So it was an athlete-driven show. It looked like it was a big party, to be honest. They had a lot of fun. It looks like it was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah. So what our listeners are going to hear on next week's episode with upon Grace Payne, one of the SSGMs, and what you just shared and what she said. We really hope that, just like my class of Southern Tribal Global Messengers had a legacy, I think this class with the SSGMs leading the closing ceremony, hopefully this will lead to, in the future, SSGMs and athlete leaders leading maybe the opening ceremony or leading other and I think Tim and Mary have talked about how it's an athlete-led organization, and I think this the legacy of this class of SSGMs, the legacy of these World Witcher Games, really all showing how it's an athlete-led.
The other thing that was great when you talk about inclusion is they paired up SSGMs with media. And there was SSGMs gathering content. So they were interviewing athletes, they were interviewing coaches, they were interviewing family members, and they were creating content. So they were doing basically unified reporting or unified content gathering. And we're finding more and more ways. I remember in the Unified Cup in 2022, we had Manu, who you know and have been on a panel with. We had Manu from Brazil. She was doing commentary and doing the announcing up in the booth during some of the matches. So we're constantly looking for new ways and creative ways to get athletes involved, to have athletes take the lead, and not to be there just to be alongside of us for the photo, but to take direction from the athletes and let them tell their stories and let them sort of get their perspective out there. So it's actually a lot of fun. Whenever you find a new idea, our team will be like, hey, why don't we have an athlete do this? So it's definitely spurring the creativity on our side to look for more opportunities, different opportunities. And then the athletes are always going to be good and step up.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. So Torino, Italy is a city with a rich history and hosting major sporting events. What, as we talk about the city, Torino, and I think that the dance sport and some of the other sports were in cities nearby in the mountains. And so what? Actually, and I think at the end of April, our listeners are going to hear from one of the Special Olympics USA coaches who coached in snowshoeing, who is actually from my local program in Illinois, and he highlighted how after they got familiar with the time change and they, by actually going to the mountains to prepare, that was good for for his athletes to kind of have that nice kind of flow from traveling to the game. So, what does the city bring to the Special Olympics experience, and how do you think the city's culture and atmosphere enhance the game for both the athletes and the fans?
Yeah, so we had a lot of challenges, like I mentioned, leading up to the event, before the delivery event. But once the event started, the outpouring of the people, the crowds at skating, the crowds in the mountains, the people really took to it. And there were people. So I was at the IOC back in 2006 and worked on the Torino Olympic Winter Games. And there are other people up in the mountains who had been there, worked on World Cups and other major events that came through. And I know from talking to people, from my colleagues talking to people, that there were people that were, really emotionally moved and sort of didn't know much about our movement. But then after a week in the mountains with our families, with our athletes, with our coaches, in these relatively small communities with a lot of interaction, really took the event to heart, and it really had an impact on people. It was something different. It was something, it wasn't a typical winter sport event in this regard. It has a different dynamic to it. And I got to say, we had a lot of family members. It's Italy, so everybody wants good food. I'm going to be in the mountains, but we had a lot of family members. And I love nothing more than seeing all the family members out. So it was great.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm going to have a few USA athletes on, and one of them really highlighted the Tylo Lagasse from, I believe he's from Massachusetts, who competed in alpine skiing, highlighted I think he co-authored a book with his mom, and he highlighted the importance of family. And so as we move into sports and competition, as the chief of sport and competition, how do you ensure the fairness of safety and competition while maintaining the celebratory spirit of the games? How do you and your team?
Sure, and that goes back to a question you asked earlier about making sure the athletes are prepared, because what you don't want to have an athlete in an unsafe condition that's not been properly coached, not properly prepared, hasn't been in that kind of environment before. So that's really important. And then, we follow all the international federation standards, all the international federation regulations related to safety. Our technical delegates are highly trained to make sure the courses are set. We have professionals that work the events along with our team. So it's always conducted in a safe manner, which is why preparation, the one thing we can't do is we can't fly to another country and coach and train an athlete. That's the responsibility of the local program, working with the region to make sure that everybody is prepared when they arrive in Torino, and we can aspire to having quality sport. Because our goal is to build a platform in which each athlete, from an MATP athlete to the fastest alpine skier, that they can all achieve their best. So whatever your personal best is, it's not about winning a medal. It's about what sport can do for you and how you can achieve your personal best. And sport's going to help you with leadership. Sport's going to help you with social inclusion, with health, all that stuff. That's why we're all here. And, that's, to your point, this is why we're all, sort of in this movement. So we just create a platform in a safe environment, high level of competition that allows everybody at every ability level to try and achieve their best. So if you come prepared, the environment we set up is going to be designed for you to achieve your best.
Awesome. I love that. And Special Olympics focuses, as we know, not only on competition, but also on personal growth and inclusion. And you highlighted that just a little bit ago, especially with the announced with the us as GMs hosting and leading the closing ceremony. How are these values integrated into the sport events themselves, beyond just the medals and athletes? And what our listeners are going to hear in a couple weeks, I believe the 14th of April, with Tylo Lagasse. At the end of the episode, he really highlighted the importance of beyond medals. I'll leave that as a tease for our listeners to listen to Tylo's episode in a couple of weeks, because he really highlighted that importance, and I think a lot of us athletes, at least a lot of us athlete leaders, really highlight the importance of going beyond medals. So, how are these values of personal growth and inclusion integrated into the sports beyond the medal and the results?
Sure. We're actively seeking more athletes who want to go down a path of being a coach, or we have a lot of athlete officials. So where we can encourage the next step in an athlete's development if they are committed to their sport. We've had assistant technical delegates with intellectual disabilities. We've had officials with intellectual disabilities. We've had coaches. So we want every element of sport to be inclusive. So we have unified sport on the field. No reason we can't have unified competition management, officials, coaches, and everything that surrounds the field also be unified. That would be the goal.
Awesome. I love that. And you mentioned about how we've had athletes as technical delegates. There's an athlete, Trent Hampton. I don't know if you've met Trent, but he is featured in a documentary called All You Hear Is Noise that we had a screening of it in Berlin, and Trent was actually on this podcast leading up to the Abu Dhabi World Games, and he competed in the triathlon event. And I've been a film consultant on this film, All You Hear Is Noise. But Trent has since then he's been a technical delegate at the Berlin World Games as well as the USA Games in Orlando. But I don't know if you've had a chance to meet Trent.
No, I haven't, but I want to see that documentary. John Paul and our team, he was able to go to the screening in Berlin. I was not able to go, and he said it's one of the best documentaries about what we do.
It is. Taylor Baker, who used to be.
I know Tara. I know Tara.
She's a producer on the film, and being a consultant on the film has been really powerful. I got to with Trent and Taylor. I hosted a panel discussion after that screening in Berlin. But I'll after recording, I'll send you a link to the website. But it's not right now. The filmmakers are finding a place to stream it. It's definitely it highlights, and I think by having a team of us with intellectual disabilities as consultants on the film, the filmmakers wanted to really highlight everything that Special Olympics is about.
And it's another great story that came out of Abu Dhabi was our relationship with BWF, the Badminton Federation. They trained officials. It's one of our best sport partners. But they trained officials in the UAE who had intellectual disabilities, who weren't only officials for unified badminton, they were officials for UAE badminton. So they were doing all the badminton in the UAE. It wasn't just about our badminton. They were properly trained, and they became officials across all the badminton events in the UAE, which is what you want to see, right? That's beyond. Awesome. I mean, that's yeah.
Awesome. So we touched a bit on new and exciting sports being introduced in 2025 Winter Games, but can you share with? And I believe dance sport might be one of the only new sports, but how did you and your team select which events were going to be part of the games, and how did you? Because I know one of my volunteer producers, Darian Packard, who is
cheer. That's so cheer. Yep.
Yeah, so cheer, and I know they've been working to get us on cheer, not just sideline, but be a sport. So like for this dance sport, how did you and this might help to answer for if there's anyone listening who might have a new sport at an upcoming World Games, but how did you guys select, and maybe use the dance sport as an example of how did you guys select?
Sure. So we use data from the census, related to how many athletes practice the sport, so how many programs report it, how many regions, and there are certain criteria. And we could bring John Paul on our team manages that process, but a sport has to be practiced by a certain number of athletes across a certain number of regions and a certain number of programs in order to be on the World Games program. The World Games program it used to be that it was a fixed group of sports and nothing ever changed. But as we know in life, some sports become more popular, some sports become less popular. You get new sports that didn't exist. Pickleball didn't exist 50 years ago. Now pickleball's on fire, right? So we've got to react. We're no different than any other sporting organization. We've got to react to what people are doing. If we go back and say, well, you got to do a sport from the 1960s that nobody's doing anymore, we won't remain relevant. So we have to change and adapt, and it's all data driven. It's all on the number of participants. There's gender elements to it. There's regions, number of programs, and then we try sports. So in Berlin, we had field hockey for the first time, which is great. The federation, the Field Hockey International Federation, has been really super supportive. They came, they brought officials. That sport's growing. Other sports maybe aren't growing as much. That's a growing sport. Rugby is starting. We get calls all the time. So John Paul is working with curling. Curling's trying to grow, and maybe it'll start in North America and grow from there. So we always try and support the sports, get them with the programs, help with the introductions, and then, they can grow the sport from there. But we're always open to what's new, as long as it's safe. There's an international federation, so it's a, legitimate governing body that we can work with.
Awesome. And I think as you were talking, another sport that it started is unified bag. So
cornhole. Yeah.
That's what it. And I know that my local club agency just in Illinois, I think we just started that a couple years ago, and so. That's another a sport, and I know we've had other sports that like I think the figure skating went away in my local program, but so it's neat to kind of to hear how you determine which events are popular, and I'm sure I don't think we have pickleball in Illinois, but I think so. Virginia has pickleball, and so it'll be interesting to see at the next World Games what new sports.
Sure.
Is there? I know that it's still a few years away, but is there any? You don't have to give too much of a sneak peek, but is there any new sports that you and your team are looking at?
So for Santiago, what we've done is we've gone to like a flexible sport model. So another part of the games is making sure that the host of the games, the host country, the region, that they have some input into what the program looks like. So we've set, here's a certain number of core sports. You must host these sports. These other sports are optional, and then propose sports that may be popular in your region, sports that you're trying to start. So there will be some different sports in Santiago, Chile, come October 2027. We will have a few different sports, and it keeps it nice. It keeps it fresh, awesome. And we're following what everybody else is doing. So it's not awesome. We're off doing our own thing. We're following what the rest of sport is doing. This sports that are growing in popularity, and then the other thing we always focus on is keeping things balanced. Like we're trying to achieve, and we will in Chile, we'll have gender equity. We'll get to 50-50. We're almost there. In Turin, we made a big step up from Austria. So we've always got to keep that in mind, make sure that we'll be fully inclusive.
Awesome. So the next World Games in Santiago, Chile will be in October 2025. Is that
27?
2027. Yeah, that's why I know. It's been a long week. 2027. So listeners, if you're listening, you can mark your calendars. If you're an athlete, you can start training. Coaches, I'm sure that those we actually, I think, had a listener who I actually met. She lives near me, but she volunteered in Berlin, I believe, at those games.
Nice.
And so, nice. So
I have to say that's another thing we're seeing. We're seeing people who are coming back to our event, the delegation assistant liaison, so the dolls. There's a group of dolls that come to the events as volunteers. That I volunteered in Berlin. I had to come to Torino. I got to figure out how to get to Chile. So it really is. It's the athletes. It's the sport. But it's become a much larger community around these events. And we're debuting new single sport events. We've got the 2026 Unified Cup. Bids are coming in. We're about to make an announcement on April the 10th for a new international sport and a single sport event like the Unified Cup, but a different sport. We're having good conversations around 2031 for the next World Summer Games after Santiago. And then we're having conversations for the next Winter Games after Switzerland, so 2033. So we've really gotten out in front of it. We're providing more opportunities, and we're just trying to work further upstream, if you would.
Awesome. So that's a good segue and a transition as we talk about athlete support and legacy of these games. What kind of support systems are in place for the athletes, both during and after the games? And we mentioned the film All You Hear Is Noise, and I'm working with the filmmakers on a podcast series that goes behind the scenes on some of the themes around the film. Hopefully we can premiere that at the end of this year, but we're still working on the series. But what the film All You Hear Is Noise is really, I think, highlights is. And this was something that myself and the others on the advisory team helped to really make sure that the film highlights is not only the athletes at the World Games, but their life after when they go home. And that's a lot of films and a lot of the media attention, like ESPN and the local media, like it's great, but that a lot of the coverage is only during the week or two of the games. And so what this film highlights is what happens after the game. So what kinds of support systems are in place so during but also after the games to ensure that the success and personal growth continues beyond the competition?
And a lot of that's going to depend on the program and how the program is set up back in their country, what resources they have, what kind of systems they have. The one thing that we are seeing is a lot more of when our delegations come home being greeted by the president of their country, by the sport minister, by the prime minister, having reception. So there's a celebration that continues that honors the national team, the Special Olympics program. So there is a recognition that comes with it. But beyond that, we don't really have any visibility. We'd have to talk with the regions. But we're hoping that this has created an opportunity for athletes to go back into their communities and sort of take what they've learned, take their experiences, share it with others, help grow the movement, right? Maybe they inspired a mother who didn't want their son or daughter to participate in sport until somebody from their village or somebody from their community came back. And so there's a lot of that. It's a lot of these athletes being inspirational to other people with intellectual disabilities, people without intellectual disabilities, to get out, to do something, to try something. And that's what it's all about.
Awesome. Absolutely. And as we know, the Special Olympics movement is about building communities. How have you seen that the impact of these World Winter Games in Torino on the athletes' local communities and on a global scale in promoting inclusion and respect for those of us with intellectual disabilities? How have you seen both the local level but also the global?
Sure. On the national level, what I think is interesting is our event is different than a traditional sporting event where maybe just the Ministry of Sports involved. So if you look at the government of Italy had the disability ministry, they had the sport ministry, they had the tourism ministry. So there was a lot of focus from ministries not typically involved in this type of work. So there's the impact that now there are 3 or 4 ministers. The prime minister had never come to a Special Olympics event before. So now they experience, actually the second lady, so the vice president's wife and the presidential delegation came over from the US, and they had a fantastic experience. So we're making an impact and bringing people in that maybe hadn't had that experience, to see all the love and to see, the sense of community. So that's really where we're making an impact on the local level. And then the Special Olympics program, in the case of Special Olympics Italia, can take those relationships and continue to move forward, because they're a really good national program.
Awesome. I love that. And you highlighted a few times of prime ministers and other political leaders coming to the games and embracing the athletes. What our listeners are going to hear on this series next, probably the end of May, is with Sean
Ferguson.
Ferguson,
Sure.
From the government, global government relations. And so I'm excited. We're mainly going to be talking about the Global Coalition for Inclusion, but I'm sure that a lot of the work that he does and that the Global Coalition does that also kind of tie in with what you
100%.
In these,
You're exactly right, Dan. 100% it does. So trying to bring people. In fact, here's an interesting story about Berlin. So we were in Berlin, and at the closing ceremony, the deputy minister of sport came. She was at Berlin for the end of the game. She came. She saw what was an amazing event. We spent a few minutes together. She went home and talked to her government, and that's how the bid from Santiago came together. It came together on the personal experience of somebody going, understanding what was happening, and thinking this was something they could take back, because they were getting ready to host the Pan American Games. They had some major event experience, but our event is so unique and it appealed to the strategy of the country, right? That's the other thing too. You've got Abu Dhabi was really good like this. You've got to look at the strategy of a country, where they're trying to go as a nation, as a community, and then what our event can bring to help them get there, right? So that's why the UAE was fantastic. Berlin was good.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And with another note that and I know we keep kind of talking about past world games, but it's all these. I think these legacies kind of build upon each other. But at the Berlin World Games, which was the last time that my SSGM class was there, there was a emotional moment of all class before we were on stage. We all got in a huddle, and there was some tears, and it was because it was the last time that a ton of us were going to be together at the games. But there was a picture that we and Mary, and then I believe the Chancellor of Germany. I'm blinking on his name. But there was a picture that we took, and I went out. I missed the athlete party later in the week because I went out to dinner with my mom and my sister that were there, and the waiter, we showed the waiter that picture, and they knew who their leader was. And so here's all a ton of us SSGMs along with Mary and a leader, and I think that picture kind of also highlights what we're talking about. At the World, did you want to add on to that?
No, you're good, Dan. Go ahead.
So at the World Winter Games, we would we've got some listeners that are all familiar with Special Olympics, all familiar with what this movement is about, but we also have a lot of listeners that are just learning about Special Olympics by tuning in to this podcast. And so, what would you say to listeners who are not familiar with Special Olympics in terms of why they should pay attention to the World Games? Why should they pay attention to our competitions, our events, and support all of us over 5 million athletes across the globe?
Sure. I mean, I think if you're involved, and everybody should get involved, there's a program, a sub-program, no matter where you live, we're there. And it's a great movement. It's a real sense of community. There's something in there for everybody. You might not like sport, but there's something else. There's dance. A lot of times people say, oh, I don't like sport, but I love dance. But there's something in there for everybody. But as far as the World Games, I mean, I think that's a celebration, right? It's a celebration of all that we do. We have education going on with summits. We've got the Global Coalition on the government side. We got healthy athletes. Healthy athletes is amazing. Cannot stop talking about healthy athletes and the great work that they do. So there really is. It brings all of our work together in one place for a celebration, and it brings us to new countries, to new markets. I mean, Santiago will be the first games in Latin America, so we'll get the whole region behind it. The media is turning out more and more. We had a lot of media coverage in Italy, and it was really, really good. So, I would say it's our most visible platform to try and raise awareness. You know, we're very well known inside the United States. Outside of the United States, we're still growing. People are still finding out who we are. So it's a great vehicle for all of that.
Awesome. I love that. We're going to take one final break to mention a couple of our sponsors, and then we'll get back to the final segment as we look to the future and get to some final thoughts as we wrap up. I know we're going a little bit longer than what we initially talked about, but it's great to kind of give this overview of the games. So we'll be back with Lou, SOI Chief of Sport and Competition, after this final break right here on SpecialChronicles.com. To let you all know that support for Special Chronicles comes from the ComEd Energy Force Ambassador Program, the country's first energy and solar efficiency education program designed for and taught by people with disabilities. Learn more at specialchronicles.com/ComEd. That's specialchronicles.com/ComEd. And support for Special Chronicles comes from United Airlines Bridge Disability Business Resource Group, connecting people of all abilities. Learn more on United's commitment to disability inclusion for employment and travel at specialchronicles.com/United. That's specialchronicles.com/United. And I should mention just briefly that if you go to specialchronicles.com/United, you cannot get discounted tickets. We can't offer you any discounted tickets. So just want to put that disclaimer out there. So Lou, as we look ahead, what are your hopes for the future of the Special Olympics movement, especially in terms of expanding access to winter sports for athletes with intellectual disabilities around the globe? What are your hopes for the future of this movement?
Yeah, man, I think as far as expanding our offering at the World Winter Games, it has to be sports that don't require snow and don't require ice, right? Because we're not going to change countries that don't have winter to situations where they do have winter. So we've got to stay proactive. We've got to continue to grow the sports that we do. Dance sport is taking off really, really well. We had a dance sport world championship a couple of years ago in Austria. We'll have another one here probably in a couple of years. So offering dance, looking at new sports, maybe it's bags, right? Maybe cornhole gets big enough to where it becomes a sport that we bring to the games, right? It'll become the winter version of bocce, right? So we want to provide quality opportunities for our athletes to showcase the best of their abilities at all levels. We want to do right by MATP athletes, triathletes, and every athlete in the middle. So it's by working with our international federation and national federation partners, creating more opportunities. We have a lot of opportunities where our athletes now are competing in world championships in like cycling. They get out on the course and they have a Special Olympics division, or floorball or powerlifting. So not only us having our own events, but us sending athletes to world championship events of our federation partners. FIBA does it with 3-on-3 basketball in Switzerland. So again, just trying to identify opportunities, trying to build strong partnerships where our athletes are included with other tennis players and other swimmers and other cyclists. That's really sort of the goal. And then to keep working out ahead. So we've always got a pipeline of events and hosts and everything secured. So I think we're in good shape. It's been good.
Awesome. I love that. And lastly, as we look back at the 2025 World Winter Games, do you have a memorable moment from the athletes, volunteers, and fans during the event? So it might be an athlete that our listeners are going to hear from in a couple of weeks. I asked a similar question, and it was hard for him to pick a memorable moment. So is it so like? Do you have a
couple that come to mind? I'm a big guy on families, and for me, the athletes are going to be great and they're going to do their best. But when I watched the reaction of the families, and there was a woman from Mexico watching her child ski, and there's a video. It went pretty viral, but the reaction of that mother, of that father, of thinking something is happening that maybe they couldn't have imagined when their son or daughter were born. For me, the impact on the families is one of the beautiful things about our movement. And then the other thing I loved was watching our athletes coach MATP athletes in the true definition of athlete leadership. So I thought that was beautiful as well. And I love MATP. So
yeah, awesome. I love that. It's always exciting to hear the importance of families, but also how athlete leadership is growing. I know my mom, after the first time that I competed, which probably I think about 20 years ago, I had a lot more hair back then, but my mom has always tells people that if the whole world were like Special Olympics, then there would be no worlds. And I think there's somebody, not from your team, but from another team at SOI, I think, has used that quote from my mom. But that quote, I think, without getting too political, but that quote from my mom, if the whole world were like Special Olympics, then there would be no worlds. I also kind of
I think Tim has used it, to be honest with you. I think I've heard that. So I think Tim has used that one.
Awesome. So before we get to the final question, do you have any final thoughts? I think this is the third time, and I think Tim has been on this podcast as a two-time guest, and I think now this makes you a 3-time guest on this podcast.
Always happy, Dan. Anytime I can spend with athletes, coaches, family members, I'm up for it all. So always happy. And shoot me. I mean, if there's something, if you got a question about something, shoot me a note. I'll always get back to you. I'll provide you with whatever information I can. So not even about being on the podcast. If there's anything I can do to help you grow the podcast, help you do anything, let me know. I'm in.
Awesome. I will. And hopefully I'll be able. I'm hoping to see if I can produce a daily podcast in Santiago. So hopefully, so if anyone is listening, if you want to help to sponsor that coverage, you can go to just email. My dad is my business manager, so if you all are listening, you can email adam@specialchronicles.com, and we can begin that conversation. But to introduce a final question, we've got a bumble, so let's go ahead and roll that bumble.
We're not just athletes.
We are the ambassadors of an uprising.
Peaceful protesters.
In a rebellion against anyone
who has a fear of difference.
Difference.
Our demands are
Equality.
Dignity.
And the recognition of our
shared humanity.
we will not stop or accept anything less.
Today, our world is
More divided than ever.
And coming together has never been more urgent.
The revolution.
is inclusion.
Find out more at jointherevolution.org.
So, Lou, ever since I attended the 2019 World Games in Abu Dhabi that we highlighted that story at the top of the episode. I've been asking this final question because we want listeners to listen and to consume this content, to listen to this podcast, but we also want our listeners to take action and to bring inclusion into their communities and bring it into their schools and workplaces and into their lives. And so I think this final question not only highlights the inclusion revolution, but really brings a final message to our listeners. And so you probably have answered this on because you've been on the program a couple times in the past, but I'll ask you, what does inclusion mean to you?
I mean, for me, inclusion is community. It's about opening up your community, opening yourself up to other people, to making yourself available, to looking at shared experiences and looking at the things we have in common rather than the things we don't have in common. So this is why, for be it sport or whatever you're into, that we do have a lot more in common than we don't have in common. And people tend to focus on the divisions, but there's more to be said for what we have as part of humanity, right? Part of the world and everything. So like you guys walking up to us in Abu Dhabi, I have a shyness that, like I said, I'm the second guy in. I'm good. We can have a laugh. Even like the LETR was great. Before the one stop at the LETR, I walked around and I could not believe when I see the patches of the law enforcement officers, how many I knew the place they were from. I maybe had a friend from there. I had driven through there. I knew something about it. So that made it easy for me when I knew that I could walk up to somebody and say something about where they were from. That got us started, and you just felt a real sense of community with the LETR folks, which is great.
Awesome. I love that. So we've got a few final plugs for all of you listening in. If our listeners want to get involved with their local Special Olympics, or even at the next World Games in 2027, which a fun fact. So in 2028, I'll be celebrating 20 years of podcasting. So a year before these next World Games, I'll be 1 year away from celebrating 20 years of podcasting. And so, yeah, so kind of a neat connection there. But we've got listeners that are just listening to the audio podcast, and so they might not see the banner that I put up on the screen for our YouTube viewers. But how can you share with our listeners how they can either connect with the local program or even get involved at the next World Games?
Sure. As far as connecting with the local program, like I said, we are absolutely everywhere. So if you're listening in the U.S., there's a state program, there's county programs, there's sub-programs, there's all sorts of opportunities to volunteer. There's opportunities to get involved with your school. If you don't have Unified Champion Schools, you can start a Unified Champion School program. That's the other great thing, too. You can get in and you can start stuff. There's all sorts of different experiences that you can become a part of. And no matter where you live in the world, we're there. And if we're not there, you can be involved in starting something.
Awesome. So I'll put a link for all of you listening. You can look in the show notes for this episode, specialolympics.org. And one of my colleagues at United Airlines, her son has autism, and her son actually has the same name as me. But she lives in Chicago, and her school is not yet. It's not a Unified Champion School, but she wants to get her son involved in Special Olympics. So I connected her with one of our local staff here, and so so that's the public. So if you're listening, definitely get involved.
Yeah, there's a program in Africa. I can't think of the name of the country off the top of my head. The ESPN did a 30 for 30 with a woman who was from there, and she had a daughter who had an intellectual disability. She started the national program. And this goes back to the families. The families are so powerful and have so much determination that a mom started a national program that's thriving now and created opportunities for the rest of our community, which is great.
Awesome. Well, and even this whole movement with Tim's mom, Eunice Cunny Shriver, it started with a family, and so yeah, families are definitely important. A few final plugs for all you listening. You can shop our merchandise store, our Disabled Voices Matter collection of t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs. 60% of the profits will go back to Special Chronicles, specialchronicles.com/shop. And go ahead, and if you're listening, tap that follow button right now. Lou and I will wait for you all to go tap that follow button and subscribe to this podcast, because I'll give you all a sneak peek on this series coming up after. We'll be talking with Grace Payne, a Southern Shriver Global Messenger, Tyler, who competed with Special Olympics USA in alpine skiing, Mary Malvin competed with SOI USA in snowshoeing, Jim Blumen is a coach who coached in snowshoeing, and then Natalie and Trey competed in the dance sport, Nick Mills competed in alpine skiing, and then we'll be talking with a few people who will on part of the Global Youth Leadership Summit. So we'll be highlighting that, as well as the Global Coalition for Inclusion. We'll be talking with two people from United Airlines, one of the global partners, and then we're hoping to talk with one of the SOI board members and longtime volunteers who volunteered with her son. And so those are some of the exciting episodes. You guys go to specialchronicles.com/Turin2025, and you can subscribe to that series and just keep following this podcast. Thank you again, Lou. It's always a lot of fun to talk to. I know, I think we said 30 minutes, but we've gone a little bit over an hour, but it's been such a fantastic time talking.
Dan, really appreciate having me on, and anything I can do to help, let me know. Have a fantastic summer in Chicago. Chicago is a great city in the summer because you guys are in a hard winter, makes for a great summer, and everybody's outside having a great time. So enjoy your summer, buddy.
Yeah, I absolutely will. I'll actually be competing in bocce at our local summer games. So I'm looking. But that's a new sport for me, so I'm excited for that. So awesome. So thanks again, Lou, and we'll see you guys all next week, right here, same time, same place, specialchronicles.com. Have a great week. Bye.
Thanks, Dan. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Special Chronicles Podcast. Our podcast was produced by Daniel Smrokowski on the Special Chronicles Network. Follow Special Chronicles on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Subscribe, rate, and review Special Chronicles on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Our website, specialchronicles.com, where you can stream our archives of over 500 episodes for free. Also, there's a list of our favorites, original series, award-winning columns, and blogs. And sign up for our newsletter to receive exclusive bonus content delivered to your inbox. Again, specialchronicles.com. Special Chronicles is hosted by Podbean Podcast Hosting. Our live streams are powered by StreamYard. Thanks, as always, to our business manager, Adam Smrokowski, who always encourages us to never give up. I'm Daniel Smrokowski, back next week with more stories.
Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.